Today we talk about prayer. When I say the word prayer, what does that conjure up in your mind? I mean, it's one of the most commonly understood, even from nominal people of faith. To say the word prayer, we all kind of get at least a conception of what prayer is, right? I mean, if there's a natural disaster, we're always sending out thoughts and prayers to people who are victims. I mean, that's just a common thing. It seems pithy a little bit, but I mean, sometimes it's all you have to give is prayer. What do you think about when you think of prayer? Relationship with God, a conversation maybe, a laundry list of anxieties and needs maybe that you just need to get out. I came across a comic strip this week of a kid who was praying to God and said, "God, is it true that to you 1,000,000 years is like 1 second?" God says, "Yes." He says, "Well, God, is it true that to you $1,000,000 is like $1?" And God says, "Yes." And the kid says, "Well, God, can I have $1?" To which God says, "Sure, wait a second." That's what prayer is, though, often. It's this list of needs we have. Maybe two ways that we commonly understand prayer, at least that I thought about. One is, this cosmic, genie, this wish list that we're always kind of throwing up, that we need these things in this amount of time, and God, can you just help us with that? Or maybe, because we're people of faith, we understand that prayer is important, but we're busy. Other things take priority. We got tasks and duties and to-do lists, and who has the time to pray regularly? And then it becomes this thing that kind of riddles us with guilt, like, no, I don't pray enough. I really should pray more. But then how do I begin? And it's like this circular argument of, I know I need to pray, but I don't do it. How do I start doing it? Well, I don't know how to start doing it, so I'm never going to do it, right? And I wonder if maybe for a few moments today we could talk about prayer in a way that makes it more approachable, more accessible, more practical, but in a way that I hope you can go home and begin as soon as your ride home to engage in prayer. One day the disciples asked Jesus, "Lord, teach us to pray." I'm always struck by Jesus' answer because he's Jesus. He's the religious expert. I mean, beyond all the divinity stuff that we know. I mean, he's the rabbi. He's the one they're following. And he could have been like many theologians I've encountered in seminary and other places, like pontificate about, this is what prayer means and the theological understanding of this and that and the other. But he doesn't do that. He's kind. Lord, teach us to pray. Okay? Here. And he just does. We know it as the Lord's Prayer, an expanded version Christian history has sort of sent through time. You heard snippets of in Luke's Gospel. Our Father in heaven, holy is your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our sins as we forgive those who sin against us, and lead us not into temptation. Deliver us from evil, we say. For yours is the kingdom, power, and glory forever. What does all that even mean? I think there are some important elements that Jesus sort of, in teaching them to pray, teaches them a different worldview. Our Father. Our is an important word. We live in such an individualized world. Everything that we have is mine, right? My this, my that, mine, mine, mine. And we're going to protect what's ours. But this is a collective our, which means you're not alone. God, you don't have exclusive rights to God. No one does. And we are, in some cosmic, mysterious way, connected to one another. Our Father in heaven. Nobody gets exclusive rights to God. I think it was Flannery O'Connor, it was Anne Lamott who once said, you know that you've made God into your own image when God hates the same people that you hate. And we tend to do that. But this prayer opens us to a worldview that says, there's no my God, it's our. And we share as God's children together. Give us this day our daily bread. That's an important one. We talked about self-control with the children a little while ago. Because we tend to want more than just our daily bread, don't we? I mean, give us this day our daily bread. Not a pantry full of bread, not a stockpile of bread, but just enough for today. Which is to say, don't worry so much about stockpiling. Maybe if you just worry about having enough, then when you have extra, you can share and be generous. The great Haitian proverb, I think I've quoted to you before, it says, God gives, but God doesn't share. God gives us everything, and it's up to us to share. To pray, give us this day our daily bread, is to say, maybe some of this extra I could share with others. I don't have to hoard it all to myself. I can be generous. That forgiveness piece in the prayer is a tough one. I mean, you just slow down. We tend to do it for rote memory, and we fly through the prayer. Forgive us our trespasses, we say, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Which is a reminder that our forgiveness is intimately linked to the forgiving spirit we have with each other. To expect God to forgive us for our wrongdoings and then to withhold forgiveness from others, that doesn't match. We are forgiving because God first forgave us. And when we withhold forgiveness, we are forgetting the goodness that God has granted toward us. The generosity, the mercy. Because each and every one of us at some point or another in our life has not deserved forgiveness. And yet, by the unmistakably humongous goodness of God, it's been granted. Because God loves us that much. And we should remember that as we decide whether or not to forgive others. Who am I to withhold forgiveness when it's been so generously given to me? You see what happens when you start picking this prayer apart? It opens us to a worldview that changes the way that we see the world. It transforms the way we see the world. Maybe that's a good step into understanding the role of prayer in our lives. It's not just about a wish list we throw into the sky. And it's not meant to be a thing of guilt that, we beat ourselves up because, we just know that we don't pray enough or we don't pray hard enough or we don't. But it should shape us into seeing the world in different ways. And so here are 3 things I want you to walk away with today. It's not the entire list of what prayer can do in your life, but here are 3 things I think prayer can do. One is prayer can connect you. This prayer that Jesus shows us reminds us that we can be connected to God and we can be connected to one another. And that gets sticky, that gets messy, especially when dealing with one another. But prayer is a way to connect us to God and to one another. Every person, I'm convinced of this, every person, whether we know it or not, longs for connection. Human beings are not made to be isolated creatures. We long to be connected to someone, to something. And prayer is the channel that can do that. I remember an old CBS interview once with Mother Teresa. I mean, who's a bigger expert on prayer, in human history than Mother Teresa? And I remember the host asking her, said, Mother Teresa, what do you say when you pray? And the answer blew me away. I've never forgotten it. She said, I say nothing. I listen. That's pretty remarkable. What's even more remarkable is that Mother Teresa later in her life admitted that she went some 20 plus years longing to hear from God and felt like it was just silence. But she listened. The faithfulness of going to listen. We don't listen well to each other, do we? We're always thinking of the next thing that we want to say. How could we be more attentive to God in just listening? Maybe cutting down some of the noise in our life. Maybe waiting, if you're a morning person, starting the day not with the television or your cell phone or the noise, but in silence to listen. I I can tell you, I started this. I've never been good at this, but in our house, and really I give Katie the credit because she kind of modeled it for me. But this notion of getting up earlier, intentionally earlier than our children. Don't use the children as an alarm clock anymore. But like, get up on purpose before them so that you can start your day in silence and prayer. I journal. That's another way that you can pray. I love to journal. I've just really, in this year, it's amazing. But I cannot tell you the benefits in my life for just taking that extra time to not be filled with noise. It connects me to God. It connects me to other people in meaningful ways. It opens me to listen. And I'm not a good listener at all. I'm a talker. But it forces me to listen. Prayer can connect you. The second thing that prayer can do is prayer can comfort you. In that connection, we are reminded that we are not alone in this world. And life can hit you so hard sometimes, right? That you feel all alone. Even in the midst of a house full of people, we can feel alone. And the good news is that through prayer, we are reminded we are not alone. And what a gift that is. Third thing that prayer can do is it can challenge you to reach beyond yourself, to give of yourself, to engage the world around you, to care about the things that God cares about, to let your heart be broken by the things that breaks God's heart too. Because when we open ourselves to that, it challenges us to be the very best versions of ourselves. That by the power of God, we are called to be more than we end up being many days. But prayer can challenge us to grow that extra mile. Connection, comfort, and challenge. 3 things that prayer can do for you. Now, I can't end the sermon without addressing the elephant in the room, which is what happens when prayers are not answered, right? The unanswered prayer. There's great little country songs about, thank God for those unanswered prayers. And that can be a good thing, but what happens when it's something that you had your heart set on and it goes unanswered? I cannot tell you how many conversations I've had with people who the greatest longing of their life is for that beloved person in their life to get well, and then they die. Or that circumstance above anything else, just please change this one little thing, and it doesn't happen. I have a friend who told me that years ago, probably when he was about 13 or 14, he realized that he was gay. And he spent over a decade of his life praying that God would not make him gay. And it didn't happen. But the real gifts in unanswered prayer that I've learned from people is there is something there, even in unanswered prayers, that God is still present. The person who loses a loved one told me once, I've never experienced love like the outpouring of love that friends gave me while my dad died. And yeah, it's loss, and there's a mystery of life and death that is beyond us, but he said there is a very real sense of love that leaves an imprint on your heart, even when prayers don't get answered. God is there. My friend who prayed that God would not make him gay for over 10 years has since come to a life of faith later in life and looks back and realizes that in that prayer of, what he thought was the prayer that he wanted answered was God saying, I love you just the way you are. I wish I could explain every unanswered prayer in your life. I really do. I have my list too. But I can tell you that the good news in the mystery of it all is that in engaging in prayer, connecting with God day in and day out, good times, bad times, in between times, that God's presence is so real and tangible. Even when we don't see it or feel it, it's there. And prayer opens our lives to know that God is with us and God holds us and that there's nothing we do apart from God's love. That we are connected to God, that we are comforted in knowing this, that we are challenged to be the very best versions of ourselves. So I told you I'd make it practical. Write them down on the back of your order of worship and take your notes home if you need to. If you will go home and say, how do I start this? A couple of ideas. One thing that I do is I don't do good sitting still. I'm just got too much nervous energy. And so I have tried to practice connecting prayer to as I move through my day. So as you walk through a threshold, in your day into a room, pray for whatever it is you're walking into, whether it's work or your children's bedroom or lunch with a friend or whatever it is. As you walk in, pray for that time that you're about to enter and just say, Lord, be with me. And then you're in there. And you're aware of God's knowledge, of God's presence with you. Another way, if you want to sit down and pray and have a more structured prayer life, ACTS, A-C-T-S, is an acronym for how you can structure your prayer. A lot of Sundays, when I write a prayer for you, this is the way that I kind of go about doing it. A, for adoration. How much you love God. Just open your prayer with how amazing God is in your life. C, confession. Where have you fallen short of being the person that God made you to be? T, thanksgiving. Give thanks to God because everything in your life comes from God. S, supplication. Bring your needs, ask, seek, knock, as Jesus said in our text today, before God. ACTS. Practice that. Journal it. Write it if you need to. But every day you could begin or end. If you're not a morning person, you could end your day praying that way. I like to pray early on Sunday mornings. When I come in and turn the lights and the air conditioning on, I like to go up and down the aisles. And I kind of know where many of you sit, although some of you move around on me. But what it makes me mindful of is to walk by your pew and think about you. And to pray for you. One of the most meaningful moments in my life is just this random moment. My first church, I was a young associate, thought I was smarter than everybody in the room. And a layperson taught me the power of prayer. She came up to me, cornered me in the hallway. She's a very passionate, charismatic Christian woman, and I kind of looked down my nose at her a little bit. But she comes to me and gets about 6 inches from me, and she says, I want you to know that I pray for you twice a day, every day. And I'm going to tell you something. It was strange because I told you I looked down my nose at her a little bit because of all her. But in that moment, I felt the energy of God that said, she is not lying. She prays for me. Wow. To know that someone earnestly lifts you in prayer is powerful stuff. And there's not a one of you in this room that somebody in your life has not done that for you. And what a gift we could do that for someone else. Pick one person in your life. Change them every week if you need to. And just that is the person that every day, as simple as God be with so-and-so. You may know a circumstance in their life. Pray on their behalf. Stand in the gap for them. Whether they're praying themselves or not, it doesn't matter. You do it for them. What a gift. Final practical tool. In your bulletin, you got a nice little card stock. My commitment to prayer. And that's simple, silly maybe even. But I want you to look at this. And I mean, especially as the offering goes and after you give your money over and all that, really think about what this means. Can I commit to pray every day? Check it. Can I commit to pray for this church? I wish you would. We need it. Check it. And a third way, I've asked for a few weeks, we've got a number of people who have volunteered. We are developing a prayer team here at Trinity Church. And it's as simple as we just need people who will pray for this church, who will pray for needs in the church, in the world, in the community, wherever it may be. But to undergird the life and breadth and ministry of this church with prayer. And we need you. If you feel led to join your heart with us and be a part of our prayer team, check that third box too. Now, if if you check one of the first two boxes, take this home with you. Put it somewhere that it will remind you to engage in prayer daily. If you check that third box, do me a favor, drop that, write your name also, and drop that in the offering plate because we want to contact you. Actually, name and email would be even more helpful. Prayer can seem like something so mysterious that it's beyond our grasp. But I'm telling you, it can be one of the simplest and yet most profound acts we ever do. To join your heart with God, with others, for the world, in prayer. They say prayer changes things. I'll promise you this, it changes something. It'll change you. Amen.